tumult in Washington and rising tension with allies. As Congress battled it out over funding the government, we look at the fallout from the Trump administration's latest moves on tariffs.
If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them.
Federal cuts.
In the absence of these programs, students and families will be hurt and the country's economic future will be damaged.
Immigration and refugee policies.
They promised to Afghanistan people that we are with you people and no one should be left behind.
And more. Hello and welcome to PBS News Weekly. I'm Lisa Desjardins. President Trump's double-digit tariffs on Canadian and European Union goods has ratcheted up economic tensions on the global stage. Stephanie Tsai begins this week's episode by looking at how the Trump administration's actions are affecting a range of sectors.
The countermeasures we take today are strong but proportionate.
European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announcing tariffs on U.S. goods totaling some $28 billion. They're set to take effect in 2 stages, starting April 1st, and cover a wide range of products from textiles to home appliances to agricultural goods. The EU is targeting many products made in Republican-held states like beef, poultry, and bourbon. But von der Leyen said there's still time to reverse course.
We will always remain open to negotiations. We firmly believe that in a world fraught with geoeconomic and political uncertainties, it is not in our common interest to burden our economies with such tariffs.
Meanwhile, in Canada,
we're hitting back against these unjustified U.S. tariffs.
25% reciprocal tariffs take effect tomorrow on more than $20 billion worth of steel, aluminum, and other U.S. imports. That's in addition to the 25% tariffs Canada imposed last week on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods. During the announcement, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister spoke directly to Americans.
Canada is not the one driving up the cost of your groceries or of your gasoline or any of your construction. President Trump's tariffs against you are causing that. And there are no winners in a trade war.
Canada's absolutely one of the worst in terms of charging tariffs.
In an Oval Office meeting with Ireland's leader, President Trump suggested he was prepared to escalate the charges.
We're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them.
The president defended his measures.
We have been abused really for a long time, and we will be abused no longer.
Saying other countries have taken advantage of the U.S. and that tariffs will protect domestic industries.
The tariffs actually align with something that I've been working on for over 30 years.
Stephen Capone is the president of Capone Iron Corporation of Rowley, Massachusetts. He agrees that tariffs will benefit his business.
I think it's a positive thing. I am supportive of the tariffs. We are being decimated by the Canadian steel fabricators, and they're just coming down and taking jobs at will. They control 95% of the publicly funded construction projects and over 80% of the private market. And there aren't much of us left, actually. They've been systematically and intentionally lowering their prices and putting us out of business.
He says that although tariffs may come with a cost, they will benefit U.S. businesses down the line.
What people don't realize, okay, there's a cost to a tariff, I get that. But there's also something associated with keeping projects domestic. In my industry, it's an economic multiplier of 1.5. So, you know, a $10 million steel job resonates $15 million through the local and regional economy. That's real money. And that could do a lot of good for the economy and the communities.
But outside of steel, many American companies are worried. Despite a positive report out of the Labor Department showing inflation slowed by more than expected last month, the optimism is constrained by fears of higher prices to come. The Consumer Price Index increased 2.8% from last year, down from 3% the previous month. But the latest data does not reflect the casualties of the current tariff war. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Sy.
On the campaign trail and in office, President Trump has been blunt. He wants to eliminate the Department of Education completely. And this week, we saw the start of the agency's unwinding. At least 1,300 workers at the department were laid off. For more on this and how it will affect teachers and students, William Brangham spoke to John King, an education secretary who served under President Obama.
1,300 workers were laid off on Tuesday, on top of another 572 who took separation packages earlier. It is an enormous reduction for the agency that's currently responsible for managing $1.5 trillion in college loans, issuing guidance on civil rights laws, and providing funding for low-income schools. So for more on how this will impact teachers and students, we are joined by John King. He's the chancellor for the State University of New York and was education secretary under President Obama. Chancellor King, thank you very much for being here. The Trump administration argues that the current academic progress of American students, which is alarming and well documented, is proof that the Federal Department of Education has failed in its mission, and thus it can be dismantled. And I just wonder, what's your response to that?
Unfortunately, they've got it exactly backwards. The Education Department has played a key role in the progress we've made over the last 40 years in terms of student performance. It's when the federal government is leaning in, providing clear accountability, mobilizing the country to improve outcomes, particularly for low-income students, students with disabilities, other vulnerable student populations, that we've seen the most progress. Where we stalled was when the first Trump administration took office, and then certainly COVID set the whole country back.
So let's say that the Trump administration continues this progress. They've already halved the size of the workforce. If they continue to go forward, as the president has said he wants to do, and eliminate it totally, what specific programs are you most concerned about going away?
I'm very concerned about Title I, which is the program that directs resources to schools serving low-income students. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act implementation. This is funding that goes to schools to support students with disabilities and the services they desperately need. The Pell Grant program and the Federal Student Loan Program, which are key to helping students get to and through college. In the absence of these programs, students and families will be hurt and the country's economic future will be damaged.
My colleague spoke earlier today with Jonathan Butcher. He's an education policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation. He was part of writing Project 2025, which very specifically called for the elimination of the department. And he argued that many of the most important functions of the department can be shopped out to other departments. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Collecting data on student achievement, I think that's a appropriate function of this agency, but that can be handled, it's an appropriate function of the federal government, but it can be handled by different departments. So for example, programs for children with special needs can move to Health and Human Services. The collection of data and measuring student progress, that can be handled by Census, which already collects data for federal offices. The student loan program, which of course is a huge part of what the department does now, can be moved to Treasury. So the department itself as a cabinet level agency should be taken apart.
Chancellor, what is your response to that? Can the principal functions of the department be shopped out elsewhere?
Look, I think that analysis is disingenuous. If the real intention was just efficiency, that you wouldn't see these dramatic layoffs of hundreds upon hundreds of people who have expertise and have been performing vital functions. You have layoffs today of folks who have been working on special education, folks who've been working on civil rights enforcement, and those jobs aren't being created somewhere else. They're just sending those people home and losing their experience for the country. So I think that's actually a false narrative that's being created. The real agenda here is to undermine public education, and that's tragic.
All right, that is Chancellor John King of the State University System of New York and former Education Secretary. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
On Thursday, a group of Democratic state attorneys general filed a lawsuit seeking to block the cuts to the Department of Education. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio this week announced the Trump administration has finished its purge of USAID, cutting 83% of its programs. The remaining programs will be moved under the umbrella of the State Department. Nick Schifrin spoke with Yanti Saripto, the president and CEO of Save the Children. He asked her what these cuts will mean for children around the world.
It has been devastating on millions of children around the world. And we're talking about impact today, not in some theoretical tomorrow. We're talking about literacy programs, education programs for young children being shuttered. I was in the DRC last year. I saw this amazing program funded by USAID that helped children who could not identify a single letter in the alphabet. And within 8 weeks, they were able to read each other a story, explain the story to each other. These were 8 to 10-year-olds. That program is terminated. More than 20,000 kids do not have access to that level of education anymore. And that is just a small example of the more than 100 programs that have been terminated for Save the Children alone.
And for those in the United States government today who argue that it just shouldn't be in the U.S. interest to go into the DRC or any random country and educate children, what would be your response?
It is a phenomenal return on investment. It is less than 1% of the federal budget. We firmly believe that the development and humanitarian assistance across the world ultimately helps countries be safer and more stable and more prosperous. And that in turn also is better for the United States and for all other countries that are a development partner.
What has been the impact of how the United States government has gone about these changes?
We've been expecting, and we were well up for, a proper strategic review of how aid gets distributed globally. It happens not just in the United States, it happens with other countries. So that is perfectly fine. The disorderly manner in which this has happened, I think, has been wasteful, cruel, particularly to vulnerable children, but also really chaotic. We have food lying in warehouses, food and medicine lying in warehouses already at the location, but we're still not able to distribute it. That perishable goods across the movement. We have to explain to communities that we're withdrawing potentially from stabilization centers where we treat severely malnourished children, children who will die if we withhold that treatment for a couple of days. How do you explain to a mom that her child, which is clinging to life just for this very cheap, efficient, effective treatment, that we're going to just rip it out without any form of transition or handover?
Publicly, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his staff said that there were waivers in place for life-saving food and aid. They've also identified publicly quite a few programs that they said that they had saved. What was your ability to apply for those waivers? What was the communication back from the United States government? And how has that impacted this story?
This has been quite a man-made crisis. So we received stop work orders to stop everything. Then we did receive exemptions for life-saving activities. It's been left to organizations themselves to interpret what exactly that life-saving meant. In most of those cases, Save the Children has been able to continue that life-saving work, even though we have not been paid for any of the work we did in December or January, or for that work that we're continuing. It's very hard to find people to actually give you an answer. And some of those people who are there are also telling us that they don't know what kind of answers to give. We have received exemptions, then we received terminations for those exemptions. Then we asked, what does that mean? Then we received rescissions of those terminations. So in the end, all that said and done, the life-saving activities for which we sought exemptions, we ultimately have received still those exemptions for, but we have not been paid in order to do them. So we're pre-financing the US government.
This weekend, a former student at Columbia University in New York was arrested by federal immigration authorities despite having a green card, meaning legal permanent status. Mahmoud Khalil helped organize on-campus pro-Palestinian protests and was seized, according to President Trump, for allegedly espousing what the president says were, quote, anti-American views. William Brangham has our report.
This arrest is part of the Trump administration's crackdown on anti-Semitism, particularly on college campuses, which were convulsed by protests last year during the height of the Hamas-Israel war. But officials have offered no evidence that Mr. Khalil broke any laws while at Columbia. And today, crowds gathered in New York City to protest his arrest. For more on this, we are joined again by Abed Ayoub. He's the national director for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. Abed, so good to have you back on the program. We should say that a judge has ordered that Mr. Khalil cannot be deported until further court proceedings play out, and a hearing about his arrest is scheduled for later this week. But when you first heard about this seizure by immigration officials, what was your reaction?
Look, the initial reaction was one of concern, deep concern and disappointment. And concern not just only for Mahmoud, but concern for this country, that we are now going down a path where speech and expression is being criminalized this way. And this should be alarming for all Americans, not only those that are standing up for Palestine and Palestinian rights. This is an alarming happening right now in this country.
The president today on Truth Social wrote that ICE apprehended Mr. Khalil because he is, quote, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student, and that he's just one of many at Columbia and at other colleges, the president alleged, who have engaged in, quote, pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity. Now, as I said, the administration has not provided any details alleging that he has said or done any of those things. We simply at this point do not know. But what we do know is that he organized protests on Columbia. He negotiated with Columbia University officials about those protests. And some of those protests were quite intense. That said, does any of the actions alleged here give the government the authority to deport someone and change their immigration status?
Absolutely not. The statements coming from the government are very heavy on accusations, but very light on evidence. Nothing has been shown or proven to be true so far, and nothing will be shown to proven or proven to be true. The only thing Mr. Mahmoud has done that they don't like is the fact that he was part of these protests, organizing these protests and these rallies against the state of Israel and its actions. And that seems to be a taboo topic that you can't talk about. And if you do, this is the situation you end up in. All he did was exercise his First Amendment rights, his right to freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And that was enough to trigger the actions and to trigger what we're seeing now. And again, this should be concerning to all Americans, that in this country, I have the right to protest my own president, my own government, but I don't have the right to protest a foreign government or a foreign leadership. That should raise many questions and red flags for all Americans. What's going to happen now is this is going to infringe and chill freedom of speech on campus. You're going to have a lot of students that don't want to partake in activities or maybe sitting out the next protest or the next rally, and it will have that chilling effect. For Mahmoud directly, he's going to have to fight this in court and in front of the judge, and the right decision was made today by the judge in New York, but he's got a long battle ahead of him. But right now, we have to focus on this policy. And the administration needs to understand that this is an issue that the president's base cares about. And they're going to, if they keep pushing this way, they're going to overplay their hand and they're going to upset many in their base as well. So this is not going to play out politically the way the president and the administration thinks. A lot of people are on the side of First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and freedom of expression in this country.
All right, Abed Ayoub, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Some 200,000 Afghans who were eligible to come to the U.S. after the Biden administration's botched 2021 withdrawal are now in limbo due to the Trump administration's suspension of the refugee program. Many fought alongside U.S. soldiers and were granted refugee visas last year, but they now fear they may never be allowed to come to the U.S. Nick Schifrin and producer Sonia Kopelev spoke to some of them.
For nearly 2 decades, they fought, sacrificed, and lived side by side with their American partners, bound by a mutual mission: create a safe, smart Afghanistan. That dream now replaced by the nightmare of Taliban persecution.
What would happen if you were forced to go back to Afghanistan?
People like me, that they have a lot of information, especially work with the U.S. Special Forces, they are not going directly to kill them. they are going to torture them, their family, their friends.
A man we'll call Mohammed and keep anonymous was an Afghan Special Forces soldier who served with U.S. Green Berets from 2019 until the U.S.'s 2021 withdrawal. He filmed this video. Their missions, often at night, always dangerous, against a common enemy.
We have been served and fight shoulder by shoulder to each other for many years against the Taliban, IS, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist groups in Afghanistan. We lost a lot of our colleagues, 150 people that I personally knew them. I'm so proud of what we did in Afghanistan for humanity and for freedom.
During the Biden administration's chaotic evacuation, Mohammed, like so many other Afghans, tried but failed to evacuate via Kabul's airport. So he fled first to the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif, where he filmed these scenes, and then 8 months later he walked across the border into Pakistan. He wasn't eligible for the special immigrant visa, so he applied for a P2 refugee visa and was approved in April 2024 through a program designed for Afghans left behind. All that remained, the processing of his flight to his new American home.
To better align with American principles and American interests.
But soon after inauguration, President Trump suspended the refugee admissions program. An executive order reads the U.S. lacks the ability to absorb large numbers of refugees in a manner that does not compromise the availability of resources for Americans, that protects their safety and security, and that ensures the appropriate assimilation of refugees.
We are not immigrants, we are wartime allies. And 20 years before America, when it came to Afghanistan, they promised to Afghan people that we are with you people and we are standing when no one should be left behind.
Those left behind, the Taliban have hunted mercilessly. And now the Pakistani government has imprisoned Afghans living in the country, including entire families, and deported 40,000 back to Afghanistan. A woman we'll call Samira is a human rights lawyer from northern Afghanistan who worked with the U.S. and foreign aid organizations to help the war's youngest victims. She provided food, medicine, and clothing. After the Taliban takeover, she went into hiding before fleeing with her family to Pakistan.
We sold our home, all our belongings, and left our beloved country to save our lives, and have stayed in Pakistan for the past 3 long years, with a lot of hope and American promises, living without any income and suffering financially and emotionally here.
She, too, was approved for a P2 refugee visa and was waiting for her flight, which means the dreams of her daughter are deferred. Afghan children can't attend Pakistani public schools, and Samira can't afford private school, so her daughter has not been able to study for 3 years.
She cries every day and asks me to send her to school, but I keep promising her that soon we will go to the United States and you can continue your education in an American school. I do not know how to explain to her my promises. I really do not have any answer now.
The idea that the United States was helping get these folks to their American dream offered some level of protection, whether they were in Pakistan, they were being allowed to exist there. And now the Pakistani government has said, no, you got to get out by March 31st, unless the United States picks up refugee processing again.
Sean Van Diver is the chairman of Afghan EVAC, a coalition of 250 organizations that worked with the Biden administration to resettle Afghans who worked with the U.S.
Every one of these people is somebody who stood up for the idea of democracy, and because of something that they did, they're at risk, or somebody in their immediate family did.
And many immediate families have been separated since the chaotic evacuation, awaiting a reunification they now fear may never come, including an Afghan woman we'll call Zahra. She worked for the U.S. military and says her family of 4, 2 older kids, 1 younger son, has been cut in 2.
We entered to the airport on August 17, which was 2 days after the fall of Kabul. They told us that we don't need to bring any family members right now. As a single mom, it was hard for me to believe that, but there was no any other choices. But I couldn't leave my 4-year-old baby because I was breastfeeding him.
At the Kabul airport, she spent days without food or water and was no longer able to breastfeed her 4-month-old son.
When they saw the baby, so dehydrated and me and like walking with no shoes and stuff under the sun, they forced me to take a plane, forced to go to a second country, leaving my two other kids. I've been promised that they will be reunited with me as soon as possible. Now it has been almost 4 years, and now I am struggling here with my almost 4-year-old baby. He underwent a brain surgery. He got a tumor resection on January 15. And for me, it's so hard to be alone, take care of my youngest son here, and being worried about my other two kids in Pakistan without any resolution.
And in the middle of that incalculable sacrifice, her father was executed by the Taliban. Today, her children's refugee visas that had been approved are now blocked, and the sacrifice feels insurmountable.
Handling the death of my father, separation of my two kids, struggling with a baby here alone without any support. It's just awful situation. We regret working for the United States government for all of my life.
An ally abandoned, an American promise broken. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
And that's it for this week's episode of PBS News Weekly. For all of us, thanks so much for watching.